In May 2018, two friends met up in the car park of the UConn Avery Point campus in Connecticut. One of them was Spencer James Mugford, who was 20 years old and a student at the University of Connecticut, so he knew the campus and the area very well, even though he was originally from Florida. He loved the water and would spend a lot of time in and around it, and was known by friends and family for being a very strong swimmer. The other was Sophia Mckenna, a 21-year-old from Connecticut, and friends and family described her as a fun, loving, outgoing person who always wanted to live life to the fullest. She was very close to her family and had recently gotten her massage license, which she planned to use as the first step in her goal to becoming a nurse. Her grandmother, Sharon Mckenna, had been a huge influence on her life, and Sophia planned on getting her nursing license to honour Sharon Mckenna's memory. And that was when she had met Spencer. They had met both while they had been working at the local spa, and Spencer had recently begun running charters out on the nearby waters. He would take people out on fishing trips where they would spend half a day out on the water before Spencer would bring them back, and it was maybe out on one of these trips that Spencer got the idea to visit the New London Ledge Lighthouse. The New London Ledge Lighthouse is a local tourist attraction, and it's often quoted as being one of Connecticut's most haunted buildings. It's got a grisly reputation, from the story of a lighthouse keeper who supposedly took his own life when he threw himself off of the roof, and it was perhaps this reputation that inspired both Sophia and Spencer to take the trip out to the lighthouse in the middle of the night. It was around 2 o'clock in the morning when the pair of them headed out towards the lighthouse in a small sailboat they'd taken from the university campus. The weather was warm enough, around 10 degrees Celsius, but it was still spring and the water was extremely cold. They had their eyes firmly set on the lighthouse, and neither of them planned on actually getting in the water, so they paddled towards it, with Sophia taking some time to post a video with Spencer's phone to his Snapchat account. The two seemed to be enjoying themselves in the video, and Sophia seemed to still be having a great time when Spencer posted a picture of her standing outside the lighthouse just a few minutes later. But this picture of Sophia would be the last. Local authorities were notified that Spencer was missing when he failed to show up for an important family event, and after contacting his friends and finding out no one knew where he was, his family went to the police. It wasn't long after that Sophia's mother, Michelle, received a phone call from Sophia's boyfriend, Austin Paro Cordova, saying that he had been trying to reach Sophia all morning and he was starting to get worried. It was only then that Michelle realised there had been several missed calls made to her phone during the night. Michelle had let her youngest child play on her phone during the day and hadn't checked it before then, but when she looked at her phone after Austin's call, she knew something wasn't right. She'd received 7 back-to-back calls from an unknown number around 2 in the morning, but she had slept through them at the time. Michelle first tried to call the number back, but it went straight to voicemail, and then she contacted the police. It was after she contacted the police that it was quickly discovered that all 7 of those calls had been made from Spencer's phone. Spencer didn't have Michelle's number, so that pretty much left Sophia being the one to make the calls as the only explanation for how Michelle had received them from his number. But what had happened, and why was Sophia trying to call her mother in the middle of the night? After talking with their friends, investigators were informed about the Snapchat and the pictures Sophia and Spencer had posted, and that they had been posted from the New London Ledge Lighthouse. Local authorities headed straight there, but when they pulled up to the lighthouse, they didn't see a boat, and the only signs they found that either of them had actually been there the night before was James's shirt tied to a cleat outside the lighthouse. Coast Guards were dispatched and authorities found Sophia's car with her phone still inside it at the university campus. 911 reported no calls from either her or Spencer, and after scouring the waters and the local coastlines, investigators couldn't find any further evidence to indicate where they were. 48 hours later, the hull of a paddle boat was found washed up on a beach in Long Island, and authorities were able to piece together a theory for what they believed happened that night. They believed that when Sophia and Spencer had docked at the lighthouse, Spencer had tied the boat to the cleat with his shirt and the two headed inside. At some point, the boat must have come loose and started drifting away, and Spencer had tried to swim after it. He was a strong swimmer, but it was 10 degrees Celsius. The water was cold and it was still the middle of the night, and at some point, Spencer must have started to struggle. Sophia must have seen what was happening from the lighthouse, and instead of calling the police, she tried desperately to get in contact with her mother before Spencer's phone ran out of battery, and she more than likely jumped in the water to try to help her friend. Sophia, unlike Spencer, was not a strong swimmer, and she would have not stood much of a chance against the currents, the cold weather, and the dark, and investigators were sure that they knew what had happened next. At this point in the investigation, it was almost certain that both of them had drowned, and local authorities were also trying to investigate 2 more cases of people disappearing on the water that night, and the searches for Sophia and Spencer were called off. The investigators had very little to work with from the start. Cameras both at the lighthouse and at the university campus gave them nothing. The cameras at the lighthouse were decoy cameras, and the ones on campus were live feed cameras, which meant that, aside from the one that Sophia and Spencer had posted themselves, investigators had no video evidence or further clues to point them in any direction. Details of the tides and currents from the night that the two went missing only made it more difficult to pinpoint a direction that the two could have drifted or been dragged off in, and it all turned into a waiting game. Almost 2 weeks later, James's body was discovered by boaters around 2.5 miles away from the lighthouse, and when an autopsy revealed that he had drowned, the investigators' theory only became more concrete. With each new body that was discovered out of the 4 people who went missing that night, hope for finding the others alive grew smaller and smaller, but Sophia's family continued to hold on to hope that she would be found, and would be found alive. Within 2 weeks of them going missing, 3 bodies were recovered from the sea, and 3 cases were closed, but Sophia continues to remain a mystery. Neither her body or Spencer's phone were ever recovered, and her family are still left without answers. Why would 3 out of 4 bodies be recovered but not hers, and how did she vanish without a trace? Her family believes that this means there is a chance that she is still alive and out there somewhere. They're holding on to the hope that she'll show up and be able to explain what happened to her and Spencer that night. They've created and still continue to update information on her case on a Facebook group called Finding Sophia Mckenna, and they continue to push for her case to be covered both in local and international media. They held a vigil for both Sophia and Spencer, and that included a moment of silence on the anniversary of the night they went missing. Friends and family gathered together to sit in silence between 2:05 and 2:09 in the morning, the time frame that those 7 calls were made to Michelle's phone, and they lit candles and left porch lights on in the hope that their prayers would be answered and those lights would guide Sophia home. There have been cases of missing people believed to be drowned showing up in strange places, even sometimes in other states, with cases of amnesia or other extreme circumstances to explain why they hadn't reached out before or even knew that they were missing to begin with. But when 3 out of 4 of the other people who went missing that night have already been recovered, it makes the likelihood of Sofia being a case like that look pretty slim. We can only hope that Sofia's remaining family and friends will get the answers they are looking for and the answers that they've worked so hard to find. The diligent and tireless efforts they and the community around Sofia have put into trying to find her are a testament to how much she's loved and how much she touched the people who were in her life. Who knows if she will ever come back to her loved ones and achieve her goal of getting her nursing licence, but it's pretty easy to say that her legacy has lived on in the way people have fought to keep the memory of a fun, loving and caring girl alive in the hearts and minds of so many. Her family still urges for anyone with any information to come forward, either to themselves or to the Connecticut State Police Major Crimes Unit. We'll also leave a link in the comments section to a Facebook group with a timeline of the efforts taken by her family and friends after Sofia's disappearance, and perhaps it will help people going through similar circumstances and give them ideas on what steps they could take to help push their cases forward.